For another perspective is the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. Premier Smith, good to have you back on the show. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You spent a long time in Washington. Have you had any communication from your contacts in the Trump administration about what is actually coming?
Well, I was pleased to see that there was a reprieve. We don't know how long that's going to be for, but I think what I hear, no matter who I talk to, who's close to him, is that the president likes to have a win.
We're going to win so much.
And you can put together a win.
We're going to win more.
In any number of ways. He's put tariffs out there as a way to be able to address some of the issues that he has. But I think he's also put a few other things out there, like our NATO commitment, Arctic security, border security. And so I'm of the view that those are the real issues. And if we can address those, we might be able to avoid tariffs altogether.
Do you think those are the real issues? And I ask because, yes, he has raised the specter of each of the three things that you just laid out. But he has also talked about, you know, to be frank, some ridiculous things like Canada becoming the 51st state, like tariffs, you know, not being punitive. I remember an interviewer asking him, well, this is going to punish American consumers. He said, I don't agree with you. Like, he believes in the utility of them on their own, aside from any leverage he might be using them to, like, you know, get more NATO spending, doesn't he?
I think he wants to make sure that we are a partner in the defense of North America and the United States in particular, which is why I think we keep on hearing about 2% NATO. It's why we keep on hearing about Arctic security, and why we keep hearing about the border security plan. Because when you look at what he did on his southern border, that gives you the kind of idea of the sort of response that he's looking for. Maybe not quite to the same degree, but that's a pretty good indication of what he's looking for from us. But it's very clear that this is a president who has advisors who believe that tariffs are a great source of raising revenue. Yeah. The problem in the Canadian context is you add 25% to that many goods going into the United States, it's just going to increase the cost of goods to Americans. And he also has an interest in trying to keep those prices low. So I think that there are some of his ideas that are competing with each other, and it's up to us to make the case about why we should continue to enjoy this tariff-free relationship, take care of the security issues, and then we can maybe start dealing with some of the individual skirmishes and irritants one by one.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
You've made the argument so far that the focus should be placed on that and not on raising the prospect, for example, of counter tariffs. What purpose would that serve?
I always think that you should try to avoid a fight, especially when you've got you know, a bigger adversary that you're fighting against. The American economy is 10 times the size of Canada, and if we get into some kind of tit-for-tat retaliatory tariffs, neither country is going to benefit from that, and Canadian consumers are going to be harmed. That's why my approach has been, what can we do to avoid the fight? That being said, I think we all know, based on previous experience, that having a proportionate response is what is normally expected when these kinds of things occur. And so I know that the federal government is working on what that proportionate response would look like. I hope we don't have to roll it out at all. I hope we can avoid tariffs altogether.
Why wouldn't we, though, be saying to this administration, like, we are willing to go there should? I mean, I hear every politician who's talking about that say, like, look, this isn't what we want, but if we have to get there, we are ready to do so. Like, why wouldn't we put that foot forward and stand up for ourselves rather than just try to make a case that so far has failed to convince Donald Trump of anything?
I guess it just depends what you think about what it is the president really wants. This is a president that likes the fight. And so if we're going to be fighting publicly, then I don't think we're going to be moving on to the issues that really matter. He's also a president that likes the wins.
We're going to win so much.
And so I think that there are ways for us to get those wins, and that's why I think we've got to try that first. Now, it may not work. It may well be that because of his attitude around tariffs, we are the largest buyer of American goods and services, but we also sell a lot into the American market. That could generate a lot of revenue for him if that's what he's really after. But I think that it will become clear very soon that the impact that will have on American consumers. I think it will also prevent him from being able to bring down gasoline prices. It'll also prevent him from being able to secure the critical minerals supply chain that he's concerned about securing so that they can have AI dominance. So I'm of the view that we have a very strong case to make, every single province, for energy security, critical mineral security, food security, the auto parts industry and the benefit that that gives to Americans on lower price cars, I think we have a case to be made. And that's why I've been out there trying to make it. I don't know if it'll work, but I think it's worth an effort to try to avoid tariffs.
If it doesn't work, there has been a lot of discussion about what levers Canada has at its disposal to counter. And I know you talked about a proportionate response. Much of the debate has focused on, the sort of nuclear option, that being adding an export tax to energy that we send to the United States, or even blocking that energy altogether. I know that you have argued that it's not logical, and that you would very much oppose that. Steve Verhoeven, who was our negotiator during the initial round of renegotiating NAFTA essentially a number of years ago, said that you've undermined Canada's negotiating position this time around. Doesn't he have a point?
I think we have to have a realistic argument. You really shouldn't threaten to do things that you can't do. And when you think about the potential, if the Americans took the same viewpoint, that they were going to cut off energy exports into Eastern Canada, that would be absolutely devastating, because the vast majority of the gasoline and energy products that Eastern Canada gets come by way of the United States. So I don't think that that's a productive way to engage in the discussion. What I would prefer for us to do, have a proportionate response, absolutely, but then let's start working on ways to get back to that tariff-free relationship. You can make that argument from every single provincial perspective. You can make the argument in terms of the costs that are going to go up for American consumers, and I think that's going to be our pressure point. When you look at the members of Congress and the governors, they certainly know that most of them have their principal trade relationship with Canada, and it goes both ways. And so I think leveraging those relationships are going to be able to make the case. If we can get some of those voices standing up and saying this is a bad idea, I think we'll be able to get through whatever tariff war we have, hopefully fast, hopefully avoid it altogether.
What's striking to me, though, is how silent they all are. Nobody is coming to our defense. Nobody appears to be advocating for us on the inner circle of Trump at the moment. And that wasn't necessarily the case 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. And so I'll ask again, I do get the logistics of what you're saying, and maybe it doesn't end up being something that can necessarily come to fruition. But why would we come to a fight with the thing that we have the most leverage with, like one arm tied behind us? Like, what is the point of taking that off the table? And are you doing that just to advance your own political interest domestically?
Well, Albertans don't want to see another equalization program. Let's be very clear about what an export tariff is. It means putting a tax on Canadian goods so that all the dollars go to Ottawa, so that Ottawa can use those dollars to redistribute to other provinces. And we've seen that newsreel before. We saw it with the way equalization works, but more in our history, the way Pierre Trudeau dealt with our province, and it created national unity problems. This is not a time that while we're having a fight with our biggest trading partner, that we also have a fight with each other. I would say let's focus on the things that we can agree on together. Let's take a Team Canada approach. Let's maybe get the Energy East pipeline back on the rails so that our Eastern Canadian friends don't have to rely on the U.S. for this vital fuel. Let's talk about more ways to get pipelines to the West Coast so that we can diversify our markets and be able to support our friends in Japan and Korea and elsewhere. I think that that's a more constructive conversation to have. If we're going to have this temporary or maybe even more permanent problem with our U.S. partner, we've got to be looking at new markets, and we would be far better off working together rather than putting forward policies that are only going to divide us.
And look, I've asked the federal government on I don't even know how many occasions over the last number of years about those extra markets and building capacity to them. But even putting that aside for a moment, we're in the moment we're in. I've also asked ministers in the past week if they would do the same thing that people are threatening over oil with auto exports, which would have an equally proportionate impact on Ontario. And they said yes. Like, they're not making it a national unity crisis, aren't you?
I don't think that will happen, first of all. And second of all,
but they're not taking it off the table. That's the point, right? Maybe logistically, like you say, both are not really great options, but they're not saying, no, I would never do that.
Well, I think the problem that we saw is that we were getting together as a group of premiers and the prime minister saying, let's not negotiate this in public. And I did my part saying, let's focus on the things that we know the Americans care about, national security and border security. And everybody else went off freelancing. And the thing they kept returning to was punishing Alberta and punishing energy. So I just wanted to make sure Now we get back to talking about the things that unite us rather than divide us. And so Albertans are just simply not going to accept an export tax on this product. They're not going to accept the federal government blocking the export of this vital product. And I don't think that that demonstrates to the Americans that we are a reliable trading partner, which is what we are trying to do. Let's find new markets. 100% on board with that. Now that we've got Trans Mountain, we have the ability to not only increase the amount that goes through that pipe, but also find new markets with it. Right now, most of it is going to the United States on the West Coast. Maybe we should start signing deals with India, with Spain, and with other jurisdictions. So I think that that's a far more constructive way for us to talk about how we can work together as a country. Same with all of our critical minerals. I mean, Saskatchewan provides 20% of the world's supply of uranium. You've heard David Eby talk about germanium being one of the key products that they have up in Northwest Territories. They have an immense opportunity on lithium. Those can go anywhere. Those can go on a rail car, those can go on a ship, and those can go anywhere around the world. And everybody wants them. So why don't we talk about ways we can support each other on finding those new markets? I think it's a far more a constructive way of approaching it.
Just one final question. I mean, to your point, the federal government bought TMX. The reason that that oil is getting elsewhere is because the federal government used not just Albertans' taxpayer dollars, but taxpayer dollars from across the country so that the entire country could benefit it. Wouldn't that be the same approach, looking to take, just leaving the specter of what can happen with oil exports on the table? Once again, like, instead of demonstrating, you know, the disparity and stuff like that, wouldn't we be demonstrating that we're not willing to be walked all over?
I think that TMX provides the exact example of why we need more of that kind of pipeline infrastructure, so that we can have more markets, so that we have more control over our own destiny, so that we can reduce the differential, because we're not facing gluts of one product only going to one customer. In fact, I wish we'd been able to build Energy East and Northern Gateway. I wish we'd been able to build more natural gas pipelines. But I think that TMX offers a prime example of how the entire country can benefit when we work together on those kinds of nation-building infrastructure projects. So I'd like to see more of that.
Then why are you pitting Alberta against the rest of the country in this instance? The rest of the country helped out with TMX to benefit Albertans and everyone.
Well, then let's benefit from it. Let's make sure that we get the highest value for our product internationally, because we have more customers to sell it to. I think people need to learn the right lesson out of what happened with that. We had 125 billion projects in Alberta canceled because of the uncertainty that happened in the regulatory environment. We could have been so much further ahead. But the fact that Coastal GasLink got built and we're about to do LNG export, that TMX finally got built, and it's had a major impact on that differential. Those are two success stories, and we should build on that. We should do more of that.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Premier, always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vasey.